The diner held its breath beneath the low hum of fluorescent lights, that pale blue flicker painting every chrome surface with the dull gleam of habit. Outside, the highway bled orange into night, but inside, time barely moved. Sarah wiped a spotless counter for the third time, the cloth warm against her fingers, the smell of old coffee clinging to her sleeves. The world was quiet, the kind of quiet that pretends to be safety. Gary stood behind the register, pretending to study receipts. Though he had read the same one 5 times, Gus in the kitchen muttered to his skillet, the rhythm of metal on metal as steady as a metronome. The radio coughed out a half-hearted country song, all twang and static. 2 truckers murmured over pie. That was the world. The hum, the hiss, the endless, slow drip of an ordinary night. Then the air changed. It began as vibration, faint and misplaced, as if the diner's heart had found a second beat. The windows trembled in their frames. The coffee in the nearest mug quivered, a dark pulse of warning. The sound didn't arrive. It was slammed against the glass. Rough, alive, a dozen engines roaring in tight formation. Gus froze. His hand hovering over the bell he rang for every order. He didn't ring it. The silence he left behind was louder than any clang. Gary's head jerked up. The color drained from his face. He looked once toward the door, once at Sarah, and then did something she had never seen him do. He disappeared, sliding behind the counter as if the napkin dispensers could save him. The roar outside deepened, not one voice but many, harmonized in fury. Lights swept across the window, headlamps cutting through the diner's reflection. Tires ground to a stop. Engines coughed, settled, exhaled. For a moment, nothing moved but the clock's second hand, swinging its small arm through the air like a metronome in a bomb shelter. They brought the outside in, road heat, old leather, the faint, cold smell of steel and rain-dry asphalt. The door opened, the space filled with them. The first man through was a wall of weathered denim and beard, his presence bending the light around him. Behind him came the others, leather, patches, boots. The sound of them was not footsteps but displacement, the air itself shifting to make room. They carried with them a kind of gravity, the unspoken assurance that whatever rules the diner lived by would now wait their turn. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Their eyes did the work, scanning the corners, measuring exits, measuring people. Conversations collapsed mid-sentence. The truckers turned to their plates. The radio found only static. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim out of respect. The leader was older than his walk, admitted. Shoulders broad, eyes like something carved from old wood. He moved through the room with slow certainty, a man who had never once been uncertain about where he stood. His beard was streaked with ash and road dust. His vest bore an insignia. Sarah didn't have to read to understand. He was the kind of man who didn't enter a place so much as claim it. They took the back booth, the biggest one, the one that swallowed birthdays and bachelorette parties whole, the semicircle filled with leather and silence, a single helmet, glossy black, with flames painted in fading orange, sat beside the leader like a relic. The flames caught the fluorescent glare and turned it into a thin blade of light. Gary was gone. Gus didn't move. The family in the corner pretended to argue about ketchup. Sarah looked at the booth. She was the only one left standing. Her stomach tightened, but her legs moved before her mind caught up. Gary had vanished. Sarah took the tray. No thought. Just the count of 12 cups. She walked to the coffee machine. The carafe hissed. Steam curled up and kissed her wrist. She lined the cups in 2 perfect rows. Each pour was measured. Steady, precise. She could feel her heartbeat through her fingers. But the coffee never spilled. She was not brave. not exactly. She was working, and work, she knew, was the closest thing to armor she had. The tray filled with the smell of roasted bitterness and steam. She added menus. Paper soft and warm, balanced everything in her palms. The weight steadied her. Her reflection in the chrome edge of the pass window was small and sharp-eyed. The floor squeaked once as she crossed to the booth. 12 pairs of eyes found her before she found the courage to look back. She placed each cup carefully, the sound of porcelain on formica sharp and deliberate. The men watched, unsmiling. Her breath came shallow, but even when she reached the last cup, she placed it in front of the leader. He looked up. She saw the pale gray in his eyes, calm and assessing. He was a man looking at a loose thread in a garment, deciding whether to pull or clip. For a heartbeat, the diner existed only in the space between that gaze and her own. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else?" she asked. Her voice was steady, a little too quiet. The leader didn't answer at first. Then his voice came, low, rough, not unkind. "Coffee's fine. Black. All of us." "Yes, sir," she said. The words were automatic. She turned to go, but her eyes caught the helmet again, the perfect shine, the orange flames frozen mid-flicker. It was beautiful in a way that belonged to another life. A memory unfolded before she could stop it. Her father in his garage. Sleeves rolled, engine guts spread on a tarp. His laughter echoing off concrete, the smell of oil, the warmth of a Sunday afternoon. She didn't think, she just spoke. "Hi, sir," she said, her voice too bright for the room. "That Road King, it's a beauty. My dad has one." The words hit the air like a dropped plate. The cup in the leader's hand froze halfway. Not a pause, a sudden, absolute stop. As if the law of motion had been revoked by his will alone. The diner inhaled and forgot how to exhale. The family in the corner fell silent mid-whisper. A fork clinked once, timidly. Then nothing. The leader lowered his cup without drinking, his gaze locked on her. Then, the man with the tattooed neck leaned forward, bringing the scythe inked on his skin into the light. The blade curved against his throat, gleaming as he spoke. "You think you know bikes, little girl." His tone was half sneer, half challenge. "You think a ride like that's just some toy your old man tinkers with." The air cracked. The clock over the pass ticked once, loud as a gavel. Goose still hadn't moved. Sarah's throat tightened. She felt her heartbeat in her wrists, her ears, her teeth. The leader didn't look at the man who spoke. He raised one hand, palm down. The gesture was small, but it carried authority like thunder. The tattooed man leaned back immediately. The booth went silent again. The leader's eyes never left her face. For a moment, she thought he might speak. He didn't. He simply studied her, as if cataloging every small decision that had led to this moment. His silence was the kind that decided things. Her hands wanted to shake. She told them no. Her breath wanted to stutter. She told it no. She stood, tray held tight against her hip, the heat from the coffee still radiating through the thin metal. Outside, the engines cool, ticking softly, a mechanical heartbeat slowing after the sprint. Inside, time stretched thin, tight as wire. The leader reached for his cup again. He lifted it, drank once, swallowed. The sound was small but final. He set it down gently on its saucer. The cup didn't clink. It landed perfectly. The fluorescent lights buzzed above. A feint électrique homme. The air smelled like oil and fear and the sweetness of pie that no one would order. Sarah stood still, her mind a white sheet. She had said the wrong thing. She knew it. But the silence that followed felt heavier than anger, larger than any outburst could be. The leader's jaw tightened. The leather of his gloves creaked when his fingers flexed once, then stilled. He didn't blink. Sarah realized her throat was dry. She forced herself to speak before her voice forgot how. Ooh, bring you your menus," she said softly. She didn't move until he nodded. Barely. Permission or dismissal. She didn't know. Her legs obeyed anyway. She turned, walked toward the counter, the sound of her shoes. A whisper against linoleum. Behind her, the leader watched, the faint reflection of flame from his helmet flickering across his knuckles. Sarah didn't look back. She reached the counter, set the tray down, and exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The air came out in a tremor. The diner returned to its hum, but it was a different hum now. Something had entered the room and settled there. Invisible but undeniable. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind that comes before thunder, and behind her, in that booth of leather and silence, the man they called Red lifted his coffee again and took another measured sip, his gaze following her in the reflection of the chrome napkin holder. The world had tilted. It just hadn't told her yet. The menus lived beneath the counter, their plastic jackets cloudy from years of hands. Sarah slid them out in a neat stack and felt the staples through the vinyl bite her palms. She took enough for the whole booth and added a folded napkin bundle to keep them from skidding. The coffee machine exhaled a thin ribbon of steam, that quiet hiss a reminder to keep everything small and precise, as if the room itself needed her to whisper with her hands. He did not know she was saving for nursing, and the calm he read as naivete was a discipline she had learned by necessity. The silence was a wound. She thought of her textbooks, dog-eared and borrowed and late by a week. Lines, underlined in pencil: "Stop the bleeding, maintain the airway, stay calm." Her apron pocket held the slip. The money was not just tuition. It was the cost of knowing what to do when the world broke. She balanced the tray and stepped away from the counter. The napkin dispenser's chrome face threw back her reflection, stretched along the curve like a warning. Her jaw was steady. That felt like something she could use. The booth watched her arrive. The men had not relaxed. They had only settled, which was different. Leather carried its own weather. Heat rose from the crescent of bodies, breathing oil and old road. They brought the outside in. The faint metallic shadow of rain dried on asphalt, the sour ghost of gasoline, the dark musk of worn jackets. Words were scarce. Assessment was plentiful. She approached at a diagonal, staying a little beyond arm's length until the last instant. Ritual mattered. Distance mattered. She placed each menu with the same small rasp of vinyl across Formica, circling clockwise. The shaved head man, the one with the scythe etched under his ear, leaned forward just enough to let the blade catch light. It was an invitation to mistake it for ornament. She did not accept. The leader kept his hands flat on the table, palms down as if anchoring the diner against drift. He watched the tray, then her face, then nothing else. He was the kind of man who spent attention like cash, deliberately and without apology. In the fluorescent wash, his beard took on the gray of weathered rope, his eyes a slow tide pulling and not returning. She set his menu last, on a small island of wiped laminate between his cup and the helmet. The helmet's black gloss held a perfect line of light. The painted flames looked ready to move and did not. Her throat tried to remember the heat of her earlier mistake. She let it remember and kept breathing. "Anything else?" she said, because that was the sentence that made rooms ordinary. She made it gentle, not soft. Soft could look like fear. The leader did not answer. He let the question lie between them. A coin on the table, neither of them picked up. When he did speak, it was with the weight of something already decided. "Sugar," he said, as if testing whether the word would sound different coming from her side of the air. "We have it," she said. On the side, he nodded a fraction. The nod was permission or dismissal. It did not matter which. It kept the rules intact. She placed the caddy as if it were glassware, careful not to let a single paper packet slur against the table. No one reached. The cups breathed black heat. The air above them shimmered with a ghost of steam. She felt it touch the back of her wrist, a thin line of almost pain. She did not flinch. The scythe at the shaved head tilted toward her. "So," he said, letting the word stroll to be sure it owned the floor. "Road King, is it?" She kept her hands moving, napkins squared, cups aligned, a corner wiped that did not need wiping. "Yes," she said, "that is what my father calls his—" "What year?" came a voice from the far curve, the man with the long gray tail speaking sideways, as if the table could answer for her. "70s, she said. "He says the year like it matters." The leader's eyes made a tiny adjustment, neither approval nor disdain. The minute click of a lens bringing something nearer. Leather shifted. The sound was like a rope tightening against a cleat. From the kitchen, Gus cleared his throat and disguised it with the clatter of a skillet. The bell above the pass remained mute, a held breath with a metal tongue. The clock ticked in hospital measure, each second arriving with clinical certainty. "You said just like mine," the leader said. He did not shape it as a question. He set it down as a fact and waited to see what it did to her. She could feel the heat of the mistake still warming the air. Apologies were sugar. Too soon. They clumped. "I meant the model," she said. "It is beautiful, sire. Beautiful." The scythe man echoed, tasting the syllables like a candy he intended to spit. "Cute." The leader raised his hand an inch and let it hover, palm down. Gravity obeyed. The man's mouth closed without protest. The room listened to the air settle. "My motorcycle," the leader said, "is not just like anyone else's." The words were a correction sanded smooth, a lesson delivered without apology. Careless words trespass. Sarah felt the heat of the mistake, but kept her spine straight. "Yes, Sia," she said, "I understand." He studied the nod, as if weighing it against an invisible scale. The fluorescent strip above blinked once, the bulb's version of a wince, then went back to its thin, relentless hum. "Where is your manager?" the gray tail asked, not with curiosity, but with the administrative interest of a man who likes to see where lines are supposed to be. "Back," Sarah said. The syllable carried no directions, and all of them, it respected the truth without offering a map. "Bring water," the scythe man said, "because announcing a need can be its own display of control." "Of course," she said, and gathered two empty glasses that did not need moving. The gesture let her pivot, without showing her back too long. She felt the leader's attention ride with her to the counter, not touching, simply present. Gary stood there, pretending to count coins he did not own. His hands were the color of paper. He met her eyes, and then skated past them like a stone that had decided to skip rather than sink. "Water," she said evenly, "a dozen." "Ice," he whispered, as if the addition could pass for leadership. "On the side," she said, and let a corner of her mouth move one notch, to tell him she was both listening and working. She turned the faucets. The old tap squealed like a mouse in a hinge. She stacked glasses in a tower she could control, a practiced finger between each to keep them from fusing into a single toppling column. The pitcher filled with a hollow chime, the sound of diner glass on diner. Sink familiar as pulse. She carried the tray back on a flat palm. The pitcher in her other hand. The weight forced her focus into a narrow corridor where only placement and balance existed. Precision was a raft. She stepped onto it and felt it hold. She set the first glass down without breaking eye contact with the leader. The rest followed. A slow ring of water around the booth, each glass landing inside the small, safe spaces where elbows were not. The scythe man took one and did not drink. Possession was the point. "Recommendations?" asked the gray tail, sudden and bland, as though they were strangers at polite risk. "Meatloaf," Sarah said, "mashed potatoes and green beans." chicken fried steak if you like a crust. She fastened her mouth against pastry. Sweetness did not go with knives. The leader glanced left and right without moving his head. Meatloaf, he said. He did not say for all of us because the booth already understood. The floor shifted under her. A subtle new gravity. Orders created procedure. Procedure made a path she could walk without looking down. I will put it in, she said, and let her eyes rest on his for a beat longer than courtesy required. Note de fiance. A check of signal and return. He held her gaze the way a man holds a tool, not with affection, with intent. Then she turned. At the pass, she tore a new chit and wrote in tidy block letters, Meatloaf, many. Gravy. Yes. Beans. Mash. She circled the booth number in red and pinned the paper with a tack, whose point bit her thumb and did not draw blood. The small pain was proof she existed on her own terms. Even inside the circumference of their silence, Gus nodded and moved into the rhythm that made time obedient. Pawns up, fat hot, onions hitting heat with a sigh. The smell of searing beef rose into the room and recalibrated appetite like a hand steadying a wobbling glass. The bell rang once, a sound that meant both time and mercy. She poured fresh coffee, the stream, a black stitch that healed the brown rings in their cups. Her hands did not shake now. Work had wound itself around her like a bandage pulled snug but not cruel. When she reached for the sugar caddy again, she saw the corner of the tuition slip peeking from her apron seam like a page in a book you refused to stop reading. She pressed it deeper. The figure printed there did not care about fear. It demanded hours. She returned to the booth with refills no one had requested. She topped each cup to the meniscus and stopped before the first tremble. No spills, no sound beyond the faint whisper of liquid against porcelain. Nods answered her, small acknowledgments that functioned as currency in places where please and thank you would have sounded like theater. Respect, the leader said, without looking away from her, is not given. It was not a threat, but an atmospheric condition. It settled on her skin like humidity before a storm. Yes, seer, she said, because sometimes more words only make the air heavier. The bell struck again. 2 plates. 4. More. She moved them in a quiet parade, building a ring of meatloaf and potatoes around the booth. Each plate set down with the same small thud that said something substantial had arrived. Forks clicked. Knives hissed through gravy. Men who had come in as a weather front ate with the efficiency of men who knew that hunger was a simple problem with a simple solution. The leader ate last. He lifted a bite, chewed, nodded once. Good, he said, the word landing like a stamp. The room loosened a notch. A belt hole let out after a too long drive. Fear did not leave. It sat down and folded its hand. Sarah gathered the empty pitcher. The first caddy, a stray napkin someone had folded into a neat square. Her hip brushed the counter as she turned, and the tuition slip whispered against fabric, a small paper heartbeat, reminding her why she held her spine straight. Behind her, forks worked, leather side. The flames on the helmet looked almost as if they were moving, orange ready to lick, arrested mid-reach by a line of paint and will. Waitress, the leader said. She paused and faced him at an angle that kept her hands busy and her eyes available. Yes, seer. What is your name? He asked, making the sentence complete on purpose. Sarah, she said. He studied her hands, the ones that had carried water without a rattle, and coffee without a spill, and plates without a tremor. Listening, he said, keeps you out of ditches. He did not smile. He looked at her hands, which had carried the plates without a tremor. The advice hung above the table like a sign over a highway. that only the careful see. Yes, sire, she said. She moved back toward the pass. The smell of gravy and coffee, braided into something almost comforting if you forgot why it was there. The clock counted out seconds with the measured certainty of a heart refusing to hurry. The fluorescent hum went on and on. The booth ate, the leader drank. The helmet held its narrow blade of light. She stacked clean plates on the side station and wiped a dry circle on the counter that did not need wiping. Her chest unlocked one notch. She did not look back. She did not need to. A good nurse knows when to monitor and when to move. Behind her, the men kept eating. The leather shifted in soft groans. A chair leg creaked like a tree, remembering wind. The air still had teeth. The danger had not left. It had only loosened its tie. And in the warm, dark rectangle of her apron pocket, the slip lay flat and sure. A quiet promise about the next hard thing she would have to do. And the next. The hum of the diner stayed crooked, an uneasy heartbeat that never quite returned to normal. The air still felt too tight for breathing, like the walls themselves were waiting for permission to relax. Grease sizzled somewhere in the back, and the sound carried through the quiet like rain on metal. Sarah stood by the counter, towel twisting in her hand. The fabric was damp from nerves more than work. The booth of leather and denim remained an island of gravity. Every word, every sound seemed to orbit around it. Red sat in the middle, calm but unmovable, his fingers laced together on the table. Around him, the other men ate slowly, mechanically, as though chewing was simply another kind of patience. Sarah turned toward the coffee machine. The carafe hissed softly, filling with dark liquid that smelled of smoke and fatigue. She poured 12 cups again, though only half were empty. When she carried the tray toward them, she felt the temperature of the room shift, not colder, not warmer, just sharper, like the edge of a knife brought close to the skin. "So, Sarah," said the man with the scythe tattoo, voice low and stretched. "Your dad, he ride with a club." Her hand paused above the tray for a second before she answered, "No, sire. He just works on bikes, that's all." "Mechanic," he repeated, drawing the word out. "That's safe." Another biker laughed softly, scraping his fork across the plate. "Safe doesn't keep you alive out there." Sarah walked the last few steps to the booth. She poured coffee into Red's cup first. Her hands didn't shake, but her stomach turned once, tight and quick. Red didn't look up until the cup was full. When he finally spoke, his voice was slow, each word heavy as a tire iron dropped on concrete. "Your father ever tell you what it costs?" he asked. She frowned. What costs?" "Sire." "The road," he said. His gaze cut through her, keeping it, owning it. The sentence hung there like the smell of hot asphalt after rain. Sarah thought about her father's hands, always stained with oil, always tired. "He says everything worth keeping costs work, sire," she said carefully. Red nodded once. "Your father's not wrong," he said, but he left something out. He lifted his cup and let the steam rise into his beard. "The road collects interest. It takes more than money, Sarah. It takes things you can't read in a book. It takes skin." The words landed heavy. They weren't meant as poetry. They were a truth delivered by someone who had paid. Sarah held the tray against her hip. "Maybe that's why he fixes bikes," she said quietly. "He's paying off what he owes." She hesitated, then added, "And maybe I owe the world more than just good grades." Red's eyes narrowed a fraction, the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't approval exactly, more recognition. "That's good," he said finally. "Fast thinking keeps people breathing." He leaned back, the leather creaking under his weight. Then, without looking away, he added, "But slow thinking gets you buried outside of town." A few of the men chuckled, not cruelly but knowingly. Sarah didn't flinch. Her heartbeat thudded once in her ears, loud and clear, but her voice came out even. "Then I'll stay fast," she said. The faint smirk faded from Red's face. He looked at her the way a teacher looks at a student who has just asked the right question without knowing it. "You'd better," he said. From the kitchen came the sound of Gus's spatula hitting the griddle. The bell over the pass remained silent, but its stillness felt like another kind of ringing. Sarah filled the other cups, moving in a smooth circle. None of the men thanked her. Their silence wasn't rude, it was ritual. When she finished, she stepped back, but Red's voice caught her again before she turned. "You read a lot, Sarah," he asked. "When I can," she said. "Books ever teach you what to do when a man bleeds out on the road?" "No, Seer. Didn't think so," he said. "Out there's no chapter for what happens when the pavement starts to drink." His words carried the taste of old memory, something he didn't mean to share but couldn't help letting slip. Sarah's fingers brushed the seam of her apron. The folded tuition slip pressed against her skin like a heartbeat. "I'm studying nursing," she said quietly, "to help when that happens." Red stared at her. For a moment, no one else in the booth moved. Then the corner of his mouth twitched again. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Good," he said. "You'll learn the same thing we did. Sometimes you keep people alive. Sometimes you just make it easier for them to go." The sentence chilled the air. The scytheman grinned. Ponytail cracked his knuckles. Red lifted his cup again. "Respect," he said softly, "means knowing which is which." Sarah didn't look away. "I'll learn," she said. "I believe you," Red said. And for the first time that night, his tone carried something like sincerity. "You've got a spine under all that quiet. Keep it straight." The scythe man tilted his head toward her. "What's the point?" he asked. "When it's all just road and rust in the end." Sarah met his eyes. "Because someone's got to keep the wheels turning," she said. The laughter that followed wasn't mocking this time. It rolled around the booth, low and genuine. Even Red's shoulders shook once in silence. He wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. "That's a good answer," he said. The men went back to their plates. Knives scraped, forks clinked. Sarah took the empty coffee carafe and stepped back toward the counter, her breath catching up to her body. She set the carafe down and pressed both palms against the cool steel surface. The hum of the refrigerator bled into her bones, steady and indifferent. Across the room, the sound of leather shifting told her the conversation wasn't over. Red spoke again, his voice carrying just far enough. "You think quick, Sarah," he said. "That's rare." She turned her head slightly, enough to see his reflection in the chrome napkin holder. "Thank you, Seer." He nodded once. "Slow. That's not a compliment," he said. "It's a warning. Quick people burn out faster. You keep the fire too long. You forget to notice the smoke." Sarah looked down at her hands. The reflection blurred as the fluorescent light flickered. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'd rather burn than rust." Red's gaze met hers in the reflection. For a moment, it held. Then he turned back to his plate. "You'll learn the cost of that too," he said. Gus rang the bell. The sharp clang made everyone in the room flinch. Sarah moved automatically, grateful for the noise. She took the new tray. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, steam curling upward, and carried it to the booth. The men made room without speaking. She set the plates down one by one, each landing with a soft, satisfying thud. The smell filled the air, rich, real, grounding. When she was done, Red gestured with his fork toward the empty space beside him. "Sit a second," he said. Sarah hesitated. "Sir, I'm working." "You've been working," he said. "Now you listen." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't quite a request. It was an order wrapped in respect. She sat at the edge of the booth, the vinyl cold against her legs. Red looked at her hands again, then at her face, "You want to know the difference between your world and mine?" he asked. "Yes, Sia. In yours, rules keep you safe," he said. "In mine, they keep you alive." He leaned closer, his voice low. "On the road, if you break a rule, you pay in blood. Out there, nobody sends you home with a warning. There's no time out. There's no appeal. You get one lesson. You better learn it fast." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then maybe the road's not so different from the hospital," she said. "People break rules there too. Some never get a second chance." For a second, Red studied her like he was trying to decide if she was lying or if she actually understood. Then his eyes softened just enough to show she'd passed whatever test he'd set. "That's a good place to start, Sarah," he said. "Most people never start there." He leaned back again, fork in hand, as though the conversation had simply folded itself away. Sarah stood. "Enjoy your meal, Seer." Red nodded once more, already cutting into the meatloaf. "We will." She turned toward the counter. The tension hadn't gone, but it had changed shape. It wasn't a blade now. It was a thread, connecting them. At the counter, she poured herself a small cup of coffee. Her hands were steady. The reflection of the booth shimmered in the metal backsplash behind the machine. Red's silhouette moved, broad and calm. She took a sip. The taste was harsh, burnt, grounding. She looked down at her wrist, at the thin white line of scar tissue there, a reminder of a mistake that had cost more than money. She traced it once, then set the cup down. "I'll keep thinking," she whispered to herself. The words felt less like hope and more like a vow. For the first time, she realized she wasn't waiting for the storm to pass. She was waiting for the wind to tell her which way the diner would turn next. Behind her, Red's voice carried softly through the hum. "Fast thinking keeps people breathing," he said again. Sarah nodded to the air, even though he couldn't see it. "Then, I'll keep breathing," she murmured. The clock ticked, the lights buzzed, and outside, beyond the glass, the highway waited, black, endless, and alive. The helmet watched her from the vinyl like a dark eye, its painted flames pinned beneath gloss. A thin blade of light rode the curve, sliding whenever she moved, a quiet little knife that never cut but always threatened to. Sarah felt the tug of it the way a bright thing in a quiet room asks to be seen and dares the viewer to stare too long. The booth breathed leather and road heat. Red sat in the patient middle, shoulders set, elbows easy, idling without losing pressure. Around him, the men ate with the unhurried focus of people who had made hunger into a discipline. Knives hissed through gravy. Forks clicked, cups settled with soft thuds. The diner had accepted the new weather and behaved accordingly. At the side station, Sarah refilled creamers and listened to the room the way a trainee listens to a monitor through a wall. No alarm yet. Low hum. Holding. Air a touch too hot. She slid the caddy onto her tray and let her gaze brush the helmet. The flame did not move. The shine did not blink. Respect is a steady thing when you keep your hands off it. Red looked up and caught her thought in midair. No smile. No frown, just the allowance of a man who lets a question live between two people until someone either answers it or learns to leave it alone. "What do you see?" he said. "Good paint," she answered, keeping her voice even. "Not new." "Loved." "Loved," said the man with the sigh that his neck, bending the word as if it were a joke he could almost make. Red lifted 2 fingers. Barely a ripple. The almost joke died before it had a chance to be cruel. He kept his eyes on Sarah. "If you touch it," he said, "it leaves a mark. Every time, even if you do not mean to, I will not touch it." Sarah said, "Good," he said. His glance slid to the caddy. "Sugar," he said. More thought than order. She brought it in like a person crossing ground that might hide holes. paper packets made a neat hiss when she set them down. The helmet sat a hand's breadth from his cup, the blade of light, exact. Wanting a thing to be simple does not make it so. She told herself she had learned that already tonight. You said old, he went on. Your father says the year like it matters. He does, Sarah said. Does he polish? Red asked. Or does he ride? He rides, she said. Polishing is for after. Red's mouth nearly tilted. Almost. He tapped a sugar packet once and put it back untouched. He lifted his cup, drank, and let the steam thread his beard. Out there, he said, nodding at the door where the night pressed its face to the glass. You do not tell weather what to do. You run in it, or you let it run through you without taking you apart. She thought of the thin white line half hidden by her cuff, the little truth she did not display unless she had to. The second she once wasted that, left a mark she had to live with. She did not look down. She did not need to. It means wait, she said. It means a machine that asks for respect and gives it back if you listen. It means it wants your full attention when it moves. And it means, Red said, cutting clean into her sentence, that if you turn your back, it will run you over. It is not romantic, Sarah. It is metal and velocity. The words were flat and cold as coin. They erased the shine without smudging it. She let them stand. She could feel the price in them. Sometimes rules keep you safe, she said. Sometimes they keep you honest. We do not run rule, Red said. We keep a code. Codes bite when you forget them. He set the cup down and left his hand where the helmet had been, palm up, lines like dry riverbeds. Your father ever let you wrench? He asked. Some, she said. He is patient, bolts less so. A low stripe of approval passed along the booth. Not laughter, not praise. Just the sound men make when a sentence fits. Ponytail wiped his knife with bread and chewed, as if the bread had agreed with him. Red looked at the helmet, then at her, then back to it again. There is a difference between knowing the part and knowing what happens when it fails in the dark at speed, he said. Books teach names. The road teaches consequences. He leaned in a hair. The difference will matter to you sooner than you think. The room tightened a notch, then eased. Sarah let her breath travel all the way down and return the same way. I am adapting, she said. He held her in the stillness of a long blink. Adapting, he repeated, turning the word once in his mouth. Good. Adapting keeps you in the lane when the shoulder is gravel. The scythe man tipped forward again, tattoo catching the light like a warning. You say old, he said. What does that even mean to you? It means mass, Sarah said. It means no shortcuts. It means you do not get to lie to it with half attention and expect mercy. His grin came like a small test passed and 3 more waiting. He sat back. The leather sighed. Gus's printer coughed. Sarah went to the pass, tore the chits clean, circled the booth number in red, and pinned them. The tack sting in her thumb was a small, good pain, the kind that told the nervous system there was still a simple world where small cause met small effect. When she returned, the helmet had moved the width of 2 fingers. Red's hand occupied its former place. He turned the palm so she could read it if she wanted. She let her eyes touch and leave. You learn with your hands, he said, not with your mouth. I do not argue that, she answered. Shame, said the scythe man softly. Arguing keeps us warm. Eat, Ponytail said, and cut another square of meatloaf, like a man obeying weather. Sarah lifted the carafe. Red's cup was fine. She filled it anyway. Black line rising to the lip, and holding, he did not thank her. He set the cup down half an inch closer to the helmet. That was thanks enough. You are hunting for overlap, Red said, where your world touches ours. Yes, she said. He lifted the helmet into his lap. The painted fire rolled. The bright blade slid to his thigh. Beside it he laid a glove, palm up, knuckles scarred. creases like laughs that heal. "This is not a symbol," he said. "It is a pledge. It says, I belong to something that will carry me into weather. I cannot beat alone and will pull me out of ditches. I cannot leave by myself. It says, I will do the same when the road asks." He looked at her and did not blink. "Your apron pocket," he said. "What does that paper say you belong to?" The word belong found the slip like a finger through cloth. She felt the rectangle press bone. "School," she said. "A future. People who will need me." Red nodded once and set the helmet back on the vinyl, lining the flame until the white blade sat true again. "We only keep score in different currencies," he said. "And now I know what currency you trade in. That is enough." The bell rang at the pass. She moved. Plates came to hand, steam braided with grease, pepper, smart as a slap on the nose. She carried weight as if it were math, steps true, path clear, tray an extension of her arms. She built the hot ring again around the booth, each plate set down with the same soft thud that said, substance had arrived. Red waited for the last piece to land, lifted his fork, cut a neat square, looked at her over it, and ate. "Good," he said, and the word meant process, and permission, and not yet finished. She gathered the empty pitcher and stepped back. Red's eyes followed and released. At the counter, she reached for the sugar caddy and fumbled it. Packets scattered like bone ditch across laminate. She did not pounce. She did not babble. She kept her hands still and counted 2 long seconds of air. Then she knelt and collected each packet in order, one clean motion at a time. A silence well kept, she thought, and stood. In the chrome she saw him see her. He said nothing. That was the lesson grading itself. She poured herself a small coffee. The steam lifted into her face. She glanced at her wrist. The thin white line peaked below the cuff. A flaw in the system. She knew the mark was visible to Red, but he had not mentioned it. The scar was the cost of a minute she had wasted, a lesson paid in blood. "Pick your silences faster," he had said. She let that sentence sit on her tongue and dissolve. Behind her, Red set his fork down and lifted his cup in a small, deliberate salute. In the glass of the napkin holder, the rim of his mug met the rim of hers, a quiet toast made in reflection between 2 people who now shared a currency. She answered with the smallest dip of chin, no clink, no word, agreement without ceremony. Red drank and set the cup beside the helmet. He did not touch the dome again. He did not need to. Everyone in the room knew the terms now. She went back to work, and the work went back to her. Wipe. Pour. Place. Nod. Gary found a stack to straighten that actually needed straightening. The truckers remembered their pie. Gus banged a pan on purpose and let an onion joke into the air. The hum resumed its thin thread, not peace, not danger, just the sound of the world between the two. The helmet sat, flame unblinking. Red did not touch it again. The work was done for now. Everyone in the room understood what was asked of them next. The next move would not be loud. It would be clean. The diner learned a steadier breath. Not the loose kind that comes after laughter, but the working breath of a body that keeps moving because it must. Fluorescents held their thin hum like wire. The refrigeration unit droned a low note that felt like a floor. From the pass, steam lifted in gentle sheets and folded back on itself. The storm had not left the room. It had agreed to take a chair. Sarah palmed a clean tray, felt its balance, set it down. She squared a stack of napkins, corners precise, and slid them into a brass holder whose lips had nipped more fingers than she could count. Beside the register, the roll of order paper showed its serrated grin. She tugged a length, wrote in block letters, circled the booth number in heavy red, and pinned the chit to cork. The pushpin bit the pad of her thumb. A sting that said, "You are here." She liked the mark more than she liked the coffee. Gus kept time with shoulder and wrist, pan to flame, sizzle to plate, plate to lamp, bell as punctuation. He did not look up when she slid the next slip beneath the clip. The pass window breathed like a small, reliable lung. The board above it took the weight of paper and turned it into order. The clipped line grew like stitches. Each stamped minute was a bead threaded on the same cord, proof that the night had not run away from them even when it had tried. The ladder of times climbed the cork in tidy rungs, her name repeated in the same neat hand. The circle around the booth was a small red halo that never wandered. Sarah moved the room the way a careful hand moves a sleeping child. One touch at a time, never too fast, never too slow. She set down water for the teenagers with the same quiet. "That means none of this concerns you. Drink your water." She refilled the truckers without their asking and watched their twin nods arrive in the same second. Gratitude disguised as habit. A family in the corner negotiated dessert with looks. She slid a fresh bundle of napkins into reach and left the choice to them. The booth at the back kept its own gravity. Red ate like a man refueling a respectful machine. The scythe man leaned as if he owned the chair and then remembered he did not, his ankles uncrossed without instruction. Sarah saw the correction land and felt the room smooth itself again. It was not always words. Often it was the absence of a sound you had learned to expect. Ponytail cut his meatloaf into a quiet grid, a private ritual that made nothing soft and everything neat. The helmet sat with flame pinned and blade of light true. No hand touched it. That had become a rule. Gary approached with a roll of coins and a fresh stack of checks, a man pretending usefulness into being. He kept his eyes on the floor, unable to look at the booth directly. A clerk, working near a kind of radiation he could not see but believed in. He mumbled about pie and total, and Sarah nodded once and kept the pass moving. He seemed grateful for the task she did not give him. The printer coughed. She tore the chit and felt the faint warmth where the thermal head had kissed the paper. She circled the booth, pinned the slip, and watched. The topmost edge, a line with the others by instinct, the board became a ledger anyone could read. A map of minutes that would stand tomorrow, when memory tried to lie. She carried 2 plates to the counter and apologized for a delay that had not existed, an apology that smoothed something that did not need smoothing. She collected 2 empty mugs from the truckers and left fresh coffee in their place. The surface, rounding and holding, no spiel. They grunted thanks without words. They did not turn to look at the booth. They did not need to. The air had told them enough. A teaspoon slid from a saucer and met the tile by her shoe with a soft, bright kiss. She bent, lifted it by the stem, dropped it into the bus tub, and replaced it with another before the coffee cooled. She did not glance at Red. She did not need to. She could feel the attention, register, and release. A pair of teenagers slid into the table by the door, elbows leading. Laughter turned soft to fit the room. Sarah took their order and wrote it plain and clean, circled, pinned, returned with water already sweating. The taller one tried to peer past her toward leather and flame. Sarah set the glasses down without commentary, and the boy found his eyes on his own table again, as if he had remembered a chore he had meant to do. The bell tapped, 2 plates to a couple at the window. The gravy thought about running, and decided not to. At the pass, she wiped the edge with the heel of her hand. Nostrik. She pushed the next chit deeper onto the pin. The cork yielded at the same depth as before. Machines were honest when they were simple. She trusted that evidence made itself whether anyone asked for it. The red circles, the order of names, the path of plates from lamp to table to bus tub, the refills that returned to their sources, the scratch of a pen on the merchant copy, The small tear when the receipt left the register throat. The fold and tuck of paper into apron and till, chain of custody performed by muscle memory. If someone asked tomorrow how the room had been kept, she could draw them a map in ink and steam and bell. Gary brought coin rolls and arranged them too carefully by the register, as if precise stacks would protect a small country. He placed a new pen on the counter and aligned it with the edge, as if that is what pens want. He did not look up. He did not need to. His hands said enough about the shape of his fear. A mother in the corner lifted her chin in a question that contained the word pie. Sarah slid to the case, warmed a knife, cut a slice of pecan that parted clean, set it on a chilled plate, and carried it to the counter where the couple shared with a small economy that looked like love. Forks took turns, plates stayed centered. The neatness of it loosened something inside her rib cage. She had not noticed had been cinched. The pass breathed. She moved. The floor held. Service became the only story. She found herself humming one bar of the radio's earlier failure, then stopped, not with fear but with a kind of respect for the room's new grammar. She let the fluorescent hum take the melody back. Red's cup emptied and filled without ceremony. He did not watch the pour. He watched the board above the pass where the ladder of times built its case. He understood the proof written there, the record of a room kept in motion. The scythe man murmured and then chose not to. Ponytail ate his last square, as if the shape of the plate mattered. At the register, a receipt curled into her hand. She flipped to the merchant copy and pressed it flat with the side of her palm. Her name printed near the bottom. The time marched above it. She placed the customer copy under the sugar jar's edge for the hand that would claim it. When the hand arrived, she watched how it held the pen, how the number and the name and the plain thank you appeared on the line, unshowy and true. The clipped slips climbed another rung. The inked minutes kept step. The board looked like a spine that had learned to carry weight. Sarah pressed a pushpin and felt the small resistance give. She liked the way the board pushed back before it accepted the point. Near the door, the taller teenager whispered a question about engines and noise. Sarah gave him water, not answers. He drank. He did not ask again. A lull arrived. That was not a lull so much as a sustained note. The room took inventory in the quiet, the way people count windows after hail. Sarah stacked 2 bus tubs, rims, meeting with a tender thock, and slid them through the kitchen door for Gus to catch with a hip without looking. He did, and did not miss his rhythm. She turned and found Red finishing. He set his fork down with the care of a man putting a tool back where it lives. He lifted his napkin and left no mess. His hand moved and the helmet's painted flame picked up a breath of light and held. He lifted his cup and kept it there. A small salute. Not to the room, but to the room's reflection in the napkin holder's warped glass. The rim of his mug met the faint rim of hers in that square. A toast in the language of objects. Agreement without ceremony. Truce without softness. Sarah dipped her chin the width of a breath. The answer traveled from her neck to her shoulders to her hands and settled there as a thing to be used. She put those hands to work because that is what hands do when a lesson is fresh. Wipe, pour, place, nod. The verbs that keep a room standing. Gary found a stack of menus that actually needed order and aligned them to the counter's edge. The truckers pushed cash under a plate, bills folded with care. Sarah lifted the plate, counted by glance, separated tip from total with the press of a thumb, and tucked the right bills where the slip warmed her pocket. She did not check the number again. The paper's presence spoke for itself. The helmet sat, flame unblinking. Red did not touch it. The men did not rise. The world did not announce its next turn. But the board held the minutes like beads on a string. The pass breathed. The bell kept its pitch. and the diner understood the terms for the next stretch of road. For now the work was enough, for now the peace would hold, and when it broke, as peace on highways and in hospitals always does, the next move would not be loud. It would be clean. The quiet held, but it held like glass. You could score with a fingernail. The hum had found its pitch, the pass breathed, and the ladder of paper slips climbed the cork in neat rungs. Sarah moved the lanes she had drawn for herself, the verbs steady in her hand. Wipe, pour, place, nod. It looked like order, which is the kind of safety that wears an apron. The doorbell gave its tired chime and let in a ribbon of night air. A man stepped through the draft. Long county jacket, reflective stripe, dulled by mud, clipboard tucked beneath his arm like a steadying rib. He carried the hour with him the way road crews do. Practical and late, Red saw him first in the chrome, a change in the light across the napkin holder, a figure written backward, and then righted. He did not turn his head. His hand slid a fraction toward the helmet and stopped, palm flat on laminate. In a touch that did not touch, the man in the jacket took stock, the way a ledger does, not by feelings but by lines. He eased to the counter and set the clipboard down with the soft authority of paper that expects signing. Evening, he said, to no one and everyone. Evening, Gary answered too quickly, arriving with a pen already aligned to an edge, as if a straight line might appease whatever rules had just walked in. The man looked from the clock over the pass to the board where the slips weathered the lamp's heat. He did not read the words. He read the pattern. He saw the precision, the kind of surgical tidiness that meant the person who made the book could not be fooled. His gaze lingered on the red circles, on the repeated hand in tidy block, on the ladder of stamped minutes that held like vertebrae. He did not touch. He only measured. Sarah felt the shift settle against her ribs. Rules had entered the room. She understood the difference now. Rules brought forms, numbers, the thin thread of fines. Code brought loyalty, heat, the sure knowledge that when payment came due, it would be taken in muscle and quiet and sometimes blood. Tonight the diner would have to hold both without dropping either. "Can I help you?" she said, taking the corner of the counter that gave her the booth and the door and the pass in a single turn of the head. Calm chose her voice and stayed there. "Inspection," he said. "Quick one. Night shifts. Forget the book." "Of course," she said. Her glance sent Gary toward whatever was nearest and helpful. He fled gratefully into a stack of checks and a roll of coin. The man flipped the first page and wrote the time across a printed line that waited for it. He pivoted the clipboard toward the sink with its sanctioned heat, toward the thermometer that always pretended to dislike clarity. He smelled the air like a professional, listening with his nose for old grease and for any ghost of gasoline that might have followed boots inside. Red did not speak. His men did not move. The scythe man's ankles stayed politely uncrossed. Ponytail carved his last square with even pressure and set the fork down. The helmet kept its thin blade of light true. Code waited to see whether Rules wanted to dance or to step aside. Sarah washed hands front and back. Soap to nails, water hot enough to count, paper dried. No towel, no shortcut. She let the ritual show itself, the way a nurse lets a sequence show. Because procedure can be a promise, the man watched and checked a box. He scanned the board, lifted the edge of one slip with the corner of his pen, not enough to unpin, enough to read the minute and the lane it proved. "Looks tidy," he said, almost to himself. "Time is a good habit." "It is," she said. The words laid a plank between his world and hers. She did not add that tonight the slips were more than habit, that they were ledger and map and oath. a line she could sing if anyone told her the room had not been held when it wanted to fall. His gaze followed the circles and drifted toward the gravity in the back. He did not stare. People who write things down learn not to, but he saw leather, road, a helmet that belonged to a pledge, and a man whose hands understood both silence and aid. Evening, Red said, giving the word the weight of a choice. Not warm, not cold. A notice that he would speak inside a room owned by rules without abandoning the code that owned him. Evening, said the jacket, and inclined his head a fraction. He turned another page, steadied his eyes on the needle while the hot water taught it, wrote a number without saying it. Numbers read aloud have a way of misbehaving. Gary surfaced wearing a hairnet like a borrowed crown, then removed it when the man did not look. The teenagers drank with the soft seriousness of people performing good behavior. The truckers arranged cash with care. The family rehearsed bedtime without speaking it. At the pass, Gus cleaned with speed and purpose, proof manufactured before it was demanded. He poured the last of the gravy into a lidded container that snapped shut with the sound of a file closing. The bell stayed quiet. Bells know when declarations are being written. How long? Sarah asked, not impatient, only building a schedule where minutes had to obey. Not long, the man said, still writing. You keep a good book here. He tapped the board lightly, a courtesy behind an observation. Thank you, she said. She meant it. She had learned what kind of thanks could carry dignity without bending to the wrong thing. Red's cup wore a black crescent at the lip. Sarah filled to the line without spill and left a breath of margin. Red watched her hands rather than the cup. He saw advice become behavior, and behavior become habit in under an hour. He drank once. Sometimes approval is a swallow. Rules do not save you when they break, he said softly, as if continuing a private thread. But a clean record can keep a man from choosing the wrong kind of trouble. And you, he added low enough for only her and the helmet to hear, have a clean record to protect. She felt the words seat themselves, not as praise but as instruction. The county jacket pulled the last receipt, read the merchant copy, and set it back with more care than paper usually earns. He chased the times on the tape against the minutes on the board, and found no gap big enough for a lie to hide. He initialed a line no one but him would read. Miss, he said, tapping the board's edge. Keep this up. Makes the rest go easy. Yes, she said, and because she had begun to pick her silences faster, she let the advice stand alone. He left a card on the counter without pushing it. White, a small seal, a name that would answer a phone when her world slept, and his kept watch. The bell chimed. Cold air crossed the tiles and thinned. The jacket took his clipboard and his reflective cuff back into the night. The door settled. The room exhaled. Gary slid the card into the drawer under the till like sheathing a blade, closed it gently, and looked at Sarah with a gratitude too jumpy to land. She spared him the arithmetic with a nod and handed him a task. Sugar jars, she said. He went, relief visible even from behind. The scythe man tossed a look at the door, a question without teeth. Red ignored the look, set his fork so the tines pointed at the clock, then turned to Sarah. Your book is neat, he said. He meant the slips and the minutes and the order, and also something behind them. It has to be, she said. People trust neat when the night tries to get messy. He gave a small stamp of chin. He slid a bill from his vest and tucked it under the plate with a motion neither secret nor public. It was a bill larger than the amount owed. Folded once, he lifted the receipt she had placed, turned it over, and wrote on the blank side, in a hand that traveled like road. He set it down where the light could read, then left it to cure. Sarah came when the plate asked to be taken. She lifted china and felt the change in weight. She took the receipt last. The ink breathed. She read the message. written as a line that meant both warning and welcome. It named an amount in plain words, 250. Keep the change. Beneath it, a smaller sentence waited. Call if the ditch is too deep. The words did not explain themselves. They did not need to. Money has a tone when it is gift rather than bait. This had that tone. The second line was code and aid in the same breath. She slid the paper into her apron pocket, where the tuition slip lay like a small, warm square. The pocket was no longer a place of quiet accounting. It was a diplomatic pouch. The two papers touched and did not fuse. She could feel the cool, crisp edge of the signed bill against the soft, familiar weight of the tuition note. Two languages sharing a pocket. Red drank the last swallow and set the cup down. The ring would wipe away in one clean circle, and still remain as memory wood keeps for itself. He stood without scraping the bench. The men rose with him, leather giving its small sigh. Engines outside answered by instinct, not yet loud, not yet anything but ready. Sarah looked at the board. The ladder held. The minutes shone like small coins under coffee steam. The proof was quiet and complete. Rules had been satisfied. Code had eaten. Her record was clean and worth guarding. Her pocket carried a new resource, and a responsibility tied with it. Red adjusted the helmet by a thumb's width, leaving the blade of light true. He looked at her and gave a nod that fit inside one heartbeat and then another. Then he turned toward the door. His men, falling into motion that suggested weather, obeyed them on loan. The bell chimed, and the air drew its cold line and vanished. The engines coughed and settled and waited, polite only because they chose to be. The room let ordinary sounds creep back. Gus clicked off a burner. Gary aligned a pen. The teenagers remembered their elbows. The family buttoned coats. Sarah pressed both palms to the steel lip of the counter and felt its clean, cool. The night wrote itself down in ink and steam and the bell's steady pitch. In her pocket lay tuition in one language and a pledge in another. She had earned more than tips. She had earned a page she could present to either world. The quiet held, but she knew it would not live forever. Peace on highways and in hospitals is perishable. The proof was safe. The currency was real. When the price was asked, she would be ready to pay in both languages, rule and code, ledger and road. She picked up a cloth and crossed to the booth. The ring wiped away on the first pass. The table felt new beneath her hand. The night settled into borrowed order. A pressed shirt over a body that had been working since dusk. The board above the pass held its ladder of slips, each red circle a small oath pinned to cork. The fluorescent hum threaded the ceiling like wire pulled tight. Steam rose, folded, and returned to itself. The room behaved as if it had known how all along. Sarah breathed with the diner and kept it breathing. Wipe, pour, place, nod. The verbs were a harness. Her apron pocket carried two different promises that touched but did not mix. The crisp edge of the new bill against the soft paper weight of the tuition slip. The pocket felt heavier than cloth should she accepted the weight and the warning it whispered. At the back booth, Red watched the room as if it were a stretch of road he knew in every kind of weather. His cup sat empty by choice. The scythe man rested his forearms on the table. Oncle's discipline, mouth unsummoned. Ponytail drew his butter knife across porcelain, collecting the last shine of gravy, then set the knife down carefully, as if carefulness could be contagious. A lull leaned against the glass and stayed. The teenagers paid in rumpled bills and left, a triangle of folded tip pointing at nobody. The truckers rose slow, knees heavy, boots gentle on tile. The family zipped coats into a choir of small teeth. Gary counted the drawer with lips moving, a prayer to round numbers. Gus scrubbed a pan like a man coaxing a worry stone back to smooth. Sarah passed the booth with a bus tub at her hip. Red lifted a finger the width of a thought. She stopped without flinching. He did not ask for anything. He looked at her, then at the board, then at the pocket where the two papers lived. When he spoke, the words stayed inside the booth's weather. "Name your hours," he said, her head tilted, a question without noise. "For school," he added. "For what you said you are becoming." He did not say nurse. He let the word live between them, where it could not be misused. A small pull tightened under Sarah's ribs. The offer was a winch when she needed it, but it also felt like a chain with a loose end she had not yet touched. She did not grab for gratitude. She remembered the cost of quick words and held a silence that was not empty. Then she answered. "Mornings," she said. "Early. I can read before shift and after. Evenings I work. Nights when the book allows." Red nodded once. He turned his palm up, scars like pale rivers in a dry map. He tapped the receipt tucked under the salt shaker, the one with his line and the smaller line beneath. "We can cover what the book does not," he said, voice plain and unadorned. "You keep the record clean. We keep the road clear when it is not." The scythe man recalculated behind his eyes. Ponytail's gaze went to the helmet, then to the napkin holder's warped mirror, as if to see the scene again from another angle that would argue less. Sarah did not bend. "Thank you," she said. Her silence was the cost of saying yes without saying too much. The pocket warmed where the papers touched. She let the warmth be both comfort and warning. Outside, an engine cleared its throat and settled. Impatience leashed. The pass bell tapped as Gus set a clean pan into the train of drying racks. The clock clicked its next second into place. Time went on doing its polite work. Gary drifted near with a stack of napkins. Nobody needed. He put them down at a nearby table and stayed a second too long within the radius of Red's weather. Red did not look at him. Mercy in the shape of inattention. Gary stepped back. Napkins salved. Victory pale and genuine. Sarah gathered cups from the counter. Her wrist brushed the steel edge. The thin white scar flashing and hiding. She thought of the day that line stopped being a wound and became a sentence she would have to read aloud when the room demanded proof. She thought of the inspector's steady pen, how he had read the pattern and not the words. She thought of the two languages in her pocket, both of which would have to speak. The teenagers slipped out clumsy with relief. The truckers followed. A quiet migration. A draft curled under the threshold and touched her ankles with cold fingers. She set the bus tub down and rubbed heat back in with the edge of her shoe. Red pushed his empty cup toward the middle. It left a ring that would lift in one pass and still remember. He did not stand. He looked at Sarah, then at the board again. A long look that weighed. Words were coins. He counted before spending. "Say it," he said, very soft. "Not to me. To yourself. Say it the way you will have to say it into a wall when the room is loud and you are not." She placed one hand on the counter and kept her eyes on the board. Her throat went dry and learned how to swallow. She did not look at her pocket. She looked at the worn patch of laminate where Red's hand had rested. She pressed her palm there. Skin to warm spot. A counterpledge to the space he had vacated. "I will finish," she said. "I will get there. I will be the person who knows what to do when the room breaks." The scythe man's mouth almost shaped a smile and then chose not to. Ponytail nodded once to the table, as if the table had earned it. Red listened the way a mechanic listens for truth in a troublesome idol. He did not bless. He stamped with a small tilt of chin. "That is a good place to start," he said. "Most people never start there." Gus leaned into the pass and caught her eye. He lifted the scrub brush in a quiet toast and went back to steel. Kitchens know how to bless without ceremony. Sarah took the tub through the swinging door and let the dish sink swallow noise. "Rinse," Stack. Put right. She returned to the room's grammar. When she came back, Red had turned the receipt so the ink faced light. On it lay a coin, a single round weight cleaned by thumb and road and time. Its face showed a figure worn nearly smooth, and a date that meant more to him than to anyone else. It was not a tip, it was the weight of a memory he had chosen to transfer. She did not touch it. She honored its gravity with her gaze. A promise needs ballast. Along the far window, a car idled, exhaust a thin white thread. The doorbell cleared its throat and kept quiet. Gary changed a trash bag carefully. Russell turned down to a murmur. The family was gone. The teenagers were gone. The truckers were gone. Space returned to the room and tried on an echo. Red turned his head toward the door like a man who can hear distance. He lifted the helmet by its strap. Flame caught the light. The blade stayed true. "There is a bigger hill ahead," he said. "No dread, only preparation. Do not sprint the bottom. Choose your gear before you need it." "I will," she said, "because promises that short are hard to break." He set the helmet down again, not to remain, only to mark the moment before leaving. He pressed his palm to the table and lifted it. Warmth faded. A handprint going from presence to proof. He stood. The men stood. Leather sighed. The booth closed its mouth on its last word. Sarah did not step into their path. She straightened a chair that did not need it. She wiped a spot that did not exist. She gave them room that looked like chance and felt like choice. Red passed the counter and dipped his chin in a half salute. Not quite to her, and not quite to the reflection where both of them appeared stretched and bent by glass. The scythe man nodded. A concession to a new map. Ponytail pressed his lips together, as if agreeing with himself. They reached the door. The bell made its tired sound. Night drew a cold line across the floor and vanished. Engines woke in a measured sequence. Not noisy, not shy, only ready. The room absorbed the sound the way a bruise takes a touch. Sarah waited one breath, and then moved. The ring wiped clean. The receipt slid into her pocket. The cold paper edge, finding the warm slip and settling there like a rule beside a code. The coin remained for one breath. Then two. She lifted it and felt its worn face against her palm. Not money, a witness. She laid it on the board's wooden frame above the pass, a small round eye watching the ladder of minutes. Gus raised his eyebrows once and nodded. The coin was part of the record now. She returned to the register and balanced the drawer. Bills faced the same way. Ben marks aligned. Edges tapped true. The numbers marched and met without quarrel. Gary watched her sums and trusted them more than his own. He stacked menus. They stayed stacked. Heat thinned to tile and glass. Shine dimmed a layer. The hum held its thread. Sarah poured the last of the coffee and let the hollow glug count seconds. She ran a cloth over the counter. The steel told the truth to her hands. Clean, level, honest enough for morning. She took the board down a notch. A few slips left the pin and slid into the small binder where the night would sleep. She wrote the hour where the book asked and signed where it needed. Her name looked like a thing that could stand. She closed the binder and returned it to its slot. The coin kept watch above. Her hand went to the pocket. She touched both papers at once, cold and warm, crisp and soft, pledge and plan. The pocket was a diplomatic pouch. It carried her future in two languages, the ledger of clean work and the code of necessary danger. Both would be asked to speak. Both would have to agree. She looked at the empty booth, the clean table, the fading warmth of an invisible handprint. The bigger hill waited somewhere past the glass and the dark ribbon of asphalt. She would choose her gear. She would not sprint the bottom. She would keep the book neat and the record guarded. She would pay in both tongues when the price came due. She picked up the mop and drew one clean line across the floor to mark where the next shift would begin. The first step on a road only she could finish. Morning came in thin bands, a pale seam along the highway that stitched the diner back to the day. The neon slept. Fluorescent bars woke one by one under Gary's hand, their hum drawing a straight line through the ceiling. The air smelled like last night's onions folded into new coffee. Mop water had dried to a faint salt on tile. The board above the pass waited with its ladder of slips, red circles steady like small oaths that had survived the dark. Sarah let herself in with a key still warm from her palm. Sleep had been a brief room. Her hands did not ask for instructions. Code on hook. Aprontied. Counter touched for its cool honesty. And answer received. Gary stood at the register with the drawer open and the county card set at a diagonal, as if an angle might tell his future. His lips moved around. Numbers he did not speak. Morning, he said, and made it a question. Morning, she said, and made it a plan. Gus came from the back with sleeves pushed high, steel smell on him, and the promise of boiling water, walking in his wake. Blue flame bloomed under the first pot. He did not ask how the night had ended. He had scrubbed its edges. He knew. Sarah stood at the board, a quiet breath, longer than necessary. Slips clipped true, stamped minutes in order. Her block letters, repeating without apology. Above the frame the coin watched, a dull witness adopting a new post. Its face was rubbed nearly smooth. Its date meant more to someone before it meant anything to her. It was not money. It was weight. She took the binder from the shelf, eased last night's slips into a sleeve, and wrote the hour across the line the paper offered. She printed her name where the book wanted it. The pen scratched the way a listening page does. Gary hovered. The county office called, he said. Not him. A recording. Reports compile at 9. He swallowed the hour. I came early to make sure things looked right. The last word was an uncertain bridge. They do, Sarah said. She meant the room and the record, and the way the light sat on both. He nodded too fast. He gestured at the coin without touching it. What about? He asked with an unfinished hand. It stays, she said. It belonged to last night. Now it belongs to the book. Gus looked up at the word book and agreed with a small lift of one shoulder. A fresh pen met flame. Oil gave a quiet greeting. Sarah slid her hand into her apron pocket. She found both papers by feel. One was cold and crisp, a bill with Red's hand on its back. One was warm and soft, the tuition slip breathing like something small and alive. She set neither down. She pressed their edges together inside the pocket and laid her palm over them. A check, a pledge. She pulled a small manila envelope from the drawer under the pass. On its face, she wrote receipt and coin in block letters with date and time. The clock over the window read 7:14. The second hand ticked once. She wrote the minute the way the clock printed it and underlined once. Chain of custody is a humility. You name the moment, so the moment cannot name you. She held the flap open and looked at Gary. Witness, she said. He came to the counter as if to a rail. He cleared his throat. Gus eased the flame down and leaned close enough that the heat would not disagree later. She slid the receipt inside ink side up so no one could say she hid it. She lifted the coin from the frame, felt its road-worn face, and set it on the paper with care enough not to tear. She closed the flap and pressed it flat. Then she wrote their initials along the seam in a single line crossing paper and glue, a simple guard no one could counterfeit by mistake. Gus took the pen and signed where her mark ended. Gary added his name like a man in a court where the only currency accepted is truth. Sarah pressed the seam again until the adhesive answered with a soft sound, like a kept secret. She turned the envelope and wrote placed in binder top sleeveboard ledger, 7:15. Her numbers looked like they obeyed her. She slid the envelope into the binder's first sleeve, where anyone would have to see it in order to pretend they had not. The plastic took the weight with a faint squeak. Through the sheet the coin showed as a pale moon. She closed the binder and the spine clicked into place. The sound met the room and settled it. The record was safe. The bell over the door gave its half-hearted chime. 2 truckers came in early. Same shoulders as last night. Same keyed boots. They took the counter and left space as if space were a habit they had learned. Sarah poured coffee that steamed like first breath on a cold morning. Cups thudded soft on saucers. Plates under the lamps would be ordinary soon. Ordinary is a craft when you make it from scratch. Gary returned to the drawer and counted facing edges with pen marks up, little embers of control doing their work. He looked at the county card, slid the drawer shut as if that ended a conversation he was not ready to have again. Relief crossed his face without erasing caution. Radiation does not leave town. It only steps outside for a smoke. Gus rang the bell once. Bacon spoke to air. Eggs set white borders like decision. Sarah clipped a chit for the truckers, circled it red, pinned it, and watched 719 bloom on cork. She lifted plates, weighed honest, heat clean, and built the morning with forks set true. The highway wore a new light. On glass she could still see the faint rub where breath and resolve had misted last night. Far off a motorcycle coughed and went quiet again, the road clearing its throat to remind the room it still existed and it still collected interest. Sarah wiped the patch of laminate where Red's hand had rested. Warmth had gone hours ago, but the print remained for the person who knew how to see it. She placed her palm there again, not to summon anything, only to make the promise symmetrical. Her wrist flashed the thin white line and then hid it. The scar was no story now. It was part of the hand that did the work. Gary hovered with a list he had invented and a pencil sharpened for courage. The report, he said, probably fine. He glanced toward the binder. He stopped. Evidence does not need adjectives. It is all there, Sarah said. If they come, we show the pattern before we show the words. Pattern, he repeated, testing a new tool in his mouth. He slipped it into his pocket like a lucky washer. The bell chimed again. The sound came soft and then straight. Leather entered on quiet feet. Red came alone. He carried his helmet by the strap, the blade of light faithful along its dome. He set it on the counter beside the napkin holder with the flame turned toward the room as if to say, we are honest about what we bring. Morning, he said. Gareth's mouth made a shape that could be good or sir or both. Gus lifted his chin by half. The truckers inspected their coffee while inspecting the air. Sarah met Red's eyes and allowed the meeting to end. Recognition does not always require acknowledgement. He tapped the helmet once with a knuckle, as if certainty were a habit that liked to be checked. His gaze took in the board and the binder and the pale moon of coin behind plastic. He did not reach. He did not reclaim. He only confirmed. How is your book? He asked low, a question the plates did not feel. Neat, she said. He had taught her that the word is a verdict. Good, he said. He drew a folded paper from his vest. The kind that has survived pockets and rain and still remembers being square. He slid it across the counter in a motion, neither ceremonial nor careless. Last night's number was a start, he said. The fold opened on a deposit slip made in her name. The bank's ink kept a uniform blue. The figure was plain, not a dare, not a test, exactly what it said. Gary stepped back like a man near a live wire who trusts the electrician. Gus pretended to argue with a flame he did not touch. The truckers drank together with the choreography of men who will not choose sides out loud. Sarah did not touch the paper. She read it with her eyes. The numbers did not gloat. They filled a line and stopped. Tuition plus what the book would not cover. The old part of her that had counted weeks by tips and rent and late fees flinched and then adapted. The cost was not the money. It was the promise of future solitude. Help accepted now would be carried later on a hill without witnesses. "We pay now," Red said, not whispering, simply not broadcasting. "You pay later in the language you already speak. Keep the record clean. Keep your hours. The rest is road." She breathed in slow, precise measure. She thought of the inspector who read patterns and not words, of his pen that refused to say numbers aloud, of rules satisfied by neatness and of spine. You must grow on your own. She thought of the coin in the binder and how weight can live inside paper without tearing it. "Thank you," she said, and let the words stop. Gratitude dressed as agreement. No debt invited that was not already understood. Red nodded once, the stamp that seals without boasting. He turned the slip so the signature line faced her and set a pen on top. The pen rolled a little and stopped. Gary made a sound like a drawer closing somewhere else. Gus let the bell ring once and placed a plate under the lamp to remind the morning who owned it. Sarah took the pen and wrote her name where the bank asked, and the date 7/27 beside it. As the minute ticked, she set the slip into the small safe with the same neatness she gave to forks. In the ledger, she wrote deposit, received 7/28 initials, and drew a short bracket that made this line and last night's envelope belong to each other. If you write the line, you can read it back later when the room demands testimony. Red watched the small bureaucratic dance without impatience. "There is a hill," he said again, and let the sentence end differently. "When you are halfway and your legs shake, remember, you are only carrying what you chose. If it grows heavier than that, call." He did not point at binder or helmet. He did not need to. She nodded, and the motion belonged to a spine that knew why it was there. He lifted the helmet, and the blade of light went with it like a thin sword going home. He looked at the table where his hand had warmed the laminate, and then at her. "Keep the book neat," he said. "Keep breathing." "Breathing," she said, "fast when it is needed." He dipped his chin and turned. The bell gave its tone. Cold came in and left. The engines remained rumor on the glass. Red's shoulder filled the window for one beat, and then the tide of highway took him back. Sarah stood 1 second longer and moved. She filed the bank copy behind the envelope, where the coin made its round ghost. She wrote a new line and let the bracket join the two entries like a stitch. She pressed the binder until the spine clicked. The click landed and held. The room accepted the ledger as a box for truth. She poured the truckers another round. They drank like men who had decided to continue. Gary wiped an already clean patch and did not flinch when the county card slid under the drawer edge. Gus slid toast under the lamp and let the butter think before committing. Sarah went to the back booth and wiped the laminate again. One small circle to polish a circle that no longer existed. She set her palm there and let her hand cool. She felt the scar at her wrist against the table and felt it become what it was meant to be. Not a story, a tool. She checked the board, smoothed a slip that did not need it, straightened the red halos until they sat true. She looked at the binder and saw envelope and coin and deposit line, and the minute that had ticked while she wrote it, the record looked ready to testify. Morning took shape. Eggs and coffee and bills that stick and come apart. The hum learned to sound like comfort again. Outside the highway kept its light. Inside the book kept its pattern. Her pocket tugged at her hip. A diplomatic pouch, carrying 2 languages that would have to agree, the ledger of clean work and the code of necessary danger. She tightened her apron strings until the knot remembered its job. There would be a bigger hill. She could feel its grade under the skin of the day. The tools were set out. The ledger was open. The code was fed. The rules were satisfied enough to leave her work alone. She picked up the next carafe. The glass was warm. The handle fit. The bell tapped. She moved. The floor held. The morning proceeded in neat minutes that would be there if anyone asked. 9 o'clock arrived with the soft authority of a clock that had never lied. The minute hand touched the mark and held. Fluorescents kept their steady hum like a vein through the ceiling. Coffee breathed. Bacon spoke in short, hissed syllables. The board above the pass wore its ladder of slips, red circles true. The pale moon of the coin, a round ghost, through plastic. The binder sat where Sarah had left it, spine square, weight honest. The phone on the back shelf rang 3 even pulses. Gary flinched, wiped his palm on his apron, and reached. He stopped, glanced at Sarah. A look that was not "save me" but "tell me what makes sense." "Speaker," she said. He pressed the button and set the handset down with the care of a man putting a live wire on rubber. "County Health," a voice said. Calm, crisp, the voice of forms that either match or do not. "This is Gary the manager," Gary said. The word manager found a firmer chair than yesterday. "Good morning. We are compiling routine spot checks from last night. I have your site listed with a window between 1800 and 1930. We show an after-hours confirmation, quick verification on hot water temps, documented cleaning and late service logs. Do you have your book?" "We do," Sarah said. She moved into the shelf's frame so the voice could hear steadiness. Binder open, documentation ready. Pattern before word. "Name the voice," said Tidy, not rude. "Sarah, waitress, acting lead last night." A pause, measured and accepted. "All right, Sarah. Water temp first." Gus lifted the thermometer from its hook without a word. He ran the tap. The needle rose. He tipped the handle so she could read the dial herself. 164, she said. Logged at 1912. And again at 1948. She flipped to the line where her handwriting lived. The scratch from last night sounded again under her finger. "Cleaning sequence," the voice said. "Grill down 1910. Fryer filtered 1917. Surfaces sanitized 1923. Mop 1949. She touched each line as she read, as if the page could feel intent. "Time stamps," the voice asked. "Thermal print on order chits," she said. "Sequence and interval present. I can read minutes if necessary." "A beat. Reading pattern first," the voice answered. "That is sufficient. Any incidents to report?" "No incidents," Sarah said, and let the quiet after carry proof. Code had kept its promise without asking rules to lie. "One more item," the voice went on. "We received a patrol note of multiple motorcycles near your location around 1850 to 1910. Noise complaint forwarded by error, confirming no exterior congregation in violation." "No congregation," Sarah said. "Service log shows continuous orders and seating." Her eyes found the red rings for those minutes, each a small halo, saying something had been done on time. "Perfect," the voice said like a stamp, not a compliment. "Keep your book as it is. You make our work boring." "We like boring on Tuesdays," Gary said, and surprised himself by sounding like a person, not a fire alarm. A brief chuckle. A thank you. The click of a line going to rest. The shelf became a shelf again. The air loosened. Gary exhaled and looked at the binder as if it had handed him back a number he thought he had lost. He placed it back on its shelf, with care, not putting it away but putting it at a distance. A tool he respected but knew was now owned by a higher authority. He kept his hand there a second longer, as if feeling the temperature of a fence. Gus rolled his wrist and hung the thermometer. He turned a knob. Oil answered in a decisive whisper. "The kitchen prefers conclusions it can fry." Sarah checked the board for no reason, except to remind herself that order is a practice, not a prize. The coin watched without blinking. The bracket she had drawn between last night's envelope and this morning's deposit looked like a stitch holding skin She stood with her hands on the binder's cover, feeling its weight, and the slight give of the plastic. The discipline for clean logs was the same discipline she would need to keep a patient alive. Sequence, verification, no skipped steps, no theatrical shortcuts. The door chimed, highway air cross tile. The same two truckers stepped in to retrieve a forgotten thermos. They tipped hats to the room like men thanking a bridge for holding and left again. Not all movement meant a shift. Some things were just things. Gary approached the pass with two menus he would not need for an hour. He set them in a neat stack and kept his eyes on the binder's spine. "I was going to hide this once," he said, as if confessing to the room. "Not last night. Before. I thought if nobody sees it, nobody can ask." Sarah let the sentence sit. He needed to hear himself say it. "I get it now," he said. "The book keeps us visible in the right way." He shot her a square, grateful look. "I was wrong. Thanks for making it boring." "You counted the drawer," she said. "You kept the floor paid for. Boring is a team sport." He gave a short laugh that had dignity in it. He straightened the menus again, even though they already were. The gesture was maintenance, not fear. The bell tapped. Gus slid an omelet under the lamp that looked like it had always intended to fold that clean. Sarah carried it to the regular, who ate like a man with places to be. She refilled his coffee when it asked. The room held. Outside the glass, she caught the shoulder sweep of a familiar leather passing in the far lane. No stop. A shadow among morning trucks. She did not turn her head to follow. Recognition belonged to the part of her that did not need witnesses. Back at the booth, she wiped laminate in one clean circle. The space looked ordinary. That was the victory. She pressed her palm, where Red's hand had warmed the table, and felt bone meat surface. The thin white line at her wrist touched the laminate, and did not announce itself. He had told her to remember that she was only carrying what she chose. The scar agreed. She had paid for mistakes. Now she would invest in competence. Gary called from the register. "The county card," he said, fingertip hovering over the drawer. "Keep it out." "In the drawer is fine," she said. "We do not need talismans on the counter. We have a book." He nodded, closed the drawer without flinching, and went back to the 100 small things a room needs to remain itself. He moved with a new caution that was not fear. It was respect for boundaries he now recognized. Mid-morning opened like tilted blinds, light angled across chrome. Orders pinned and vanished the way clouds pin to mountains and let go when it is time. The binder stayed heavy and still. The envelope's faint moon kept watch. The deposit slip behind it rested in neat relation. The bracket between them read like bone joined to bone. A boy from the gas station slid in for a coffee to go and smelled like rubber and weather. He practiced adulthood with his jaw. Sarah gave him extra creamers because practicing has its costs. He left a tip that was too much for coffee and exactly right for trying. The phone rang once local. Gary listened and hung up. "Owner's cousin," he said, "heard a story. Wants to know if we let a gang take over the booth." The old fear rose half an inch, then stopped. He looked at Sarah. "We have the book." "We have the book," she said. "Do you want me to call?" "No," he said, surprising himself. "I will." He lifted the binder like a tool he now expected to use well, and stepped into the office. He did not shut the door. His voice carried like steady light. "Yes, we have logs. No incidents." Inspector confirmed. He read the stamped minutes aloud, each number a rung on a ladder that did not shake. When he returned, he shelved the binder with the same care as before. Not closing distance, only acknowledging it. His eyes looked clearer, not bigger. He wiped a clean patch of counter and did not realign anything that was already true. Gus leaned into the pass. "Lunch rush in 20, he said. "You want to breathe now or later?" "Now," she said. He did not look at her as a co-worker. He looked at her as a component he trusted. He nodded once, and let the silence stand a man acknowledging a peer who spoke a different, sharper language. Then he vanished back into flame and steel. 11 came. The teenagers from last night returned like a test retaken. They took the same table by the door. Their laughter stayed quiet. Their eyes drifted and then behaved. "You remember the water rule," she said, setting down 2 sweating glasses. "Yes, ma'am," the taller one said, and did not blush. They shared fries. Ketchup behaved. When they left, they stacked 2 singles square. Sarah slid the bills into her apron and did not count them again. The important arithmetic had been done. Near noon, Gary printed the inspector's email and handed it to Sarah with both hands. "Compliance confirmed records. Satisfactory. Keep your book." The paper felt dense and a little damp. She tucked it behind the deposit slip, drew a second bracket, and wrote noon on the line. The page began to look like a skeleton that could move. She held the binder closed and felt the weight and the slight flecks under her fingers. The coin glowed like a daylit moon through plastic. She slid her palm along the spine until it clicked into its seat. The click settled the room again. Even clicks are language. Lunch found them. Forks ticked, plates hurried and calm. The bell worked its one note like a heart. The floor held, the book held, the highway brightened, then dimmed, then brightened again. No grand gestures, only the accumulation of small, correct acts. Sarah's apron tugged at her hip. The pouch felt heavier by promise than by paper. She slid her hand in and touched both at once, cold and warm, crisp and soft, pledge and plan. The pocket was a diplomatic pouch. It carried her future in 2 languages that would have to agree, the ledger of clean work and the code of necessary danger. She looked at the pass, then the board, then the binder, then the door. Beyond the glass, the bigger hill waited unbothered by calendars. She had not chosen all of this, but she had chosen enough. The binder watched from its shelf. The coin kept its round, quiet eye on minutes that would testify if asked. Gary moved with care at the proper distance. Gus measured heat with a glance that wasted nothing. Respect had arrived in the room, and it brought space with it. Space is a form of isolation you earn. The rush crested and eased. She checked totals. She wrote 2 neat lines in the ledger and underlined once. Then she untied her apron and folded it to a square. She did not put it back on. She took her jacket from the hook. It felt heavier than fabric should. She slipped the 2 papers from her pocket into the inner pocket of the jacket, where the lining had a stitch she trusted. Together they felt like a single, unbreakable key. Gary looked up and looked away as if doors should open without ceremony. Gus raised the scrub brush like a salute without words. Sarah nodded once to each and none. She pressed her palm flat on the counter and felt the steel say what clean, level, ready always says. Keep the book neat. Keep breathing. Keep going. She pushed through the squeak of the door and stepped into the day. The highway's breath met her face. The hill did not move to meet her. That would be her job. She set her shoulders and walked toward it, carrying a ledger balanced and a code paid in full. The afternoon stretched thin and bright, a sheet of light laid over town and highway. Sarah walked the sidewalk with her jacket zipped against a breeze that did not care about calendars. The papers in the inner pocket rode close to her ribs. The tuition slip warm from her body. The deposit proof cool as a coin kept in shade. 2 languages pressed together like palms. Do not sprint the bottom of the hill. Red had said, streets are hills when you are carrying a future. The nursing building stood a little apart from the rest of campus. Brick steady, windows polished into quiet rules. She pushed through the door and into a lobby that smelled faintly of sanitizer and copier ink. A clean bureaucracy that did not need to raise its voice, but underneath that orderly breath, she caught the ghost of something else. the lingering metallic scent of road oil and velocity her jacket had carried in. Code and rules met at the threshold, one in the cloth, one in the air. A student ahead of her solved a paper with more paper. When it was her turn, Sarah set her jacket on the counter and slid out the 2 slips. She did not let them clatter. She flattened them with the side of her hand the way she would smooth a wrinkle from a bedsheet in a room that needed to be ready. Program and term, the clerk said. Cardigan neutral, voice steady. The office speaking through a person. Nursing, Sarah said. Spring start. Part-time evenings. Mornings for study. Work around the shifts. The clerk nodded and the computer hummed like a modest engine. Slip and proof, the clerk said without looking up. Sarah gave them over in the order she wanted the story told. The clerk read, typed, read again. You understand the hours. You understand clinical requirements and documentation kept current. I do, Sarah said. The discipline for clean logs is the discipline that keeps a person alive. The clerk glanced up, not surprised, just measuring fit. You will find that true, the clerk said, and the printer answered with a crisp shuffle. 2 pages arrived that were both permission and assignment. A round stamp marked the corner with a ring of authority. Sarah signed where the line offered itself and dated in words. A habit now. A small oath to language that would have to testify later. A thin folder slid back to her across the counter. A quiet ceremony of entry completed. Welcome, the clerk said, as if welcoming were a task to perform correctly. Orientation in 2 weeks. Syllabus will post sooner. Keep immunizations and background screens in a neat packet. Neat saves time when the room is loud. Sarah thanked the clerk with the right weight and stepped into the daylight again. She sat on a low wall, scuffed by hundreds of decisions, and opened the folder, just enough to feel its lightness. She listened to the wind across the open lot and to the far breath of the highway. She thought of last night, of a cup that had frozen halfway to a mouth, of silence that had bent without breaking. She could feel both rooms at once, fluorescent hum and hospital quiet, and the spine those rooms demanded. At the bookstore she lifted a nursing text, glossy and earnest, the heft of it a kind of honesty. She found the chapter on airway and read a paragraph under her breath, words tucking themselves behind her teeth as if they had been waiting there. Stop the bleeding, maintain the airway, stay calm. She thought of the night her sister had not, a memory that lived with the gravity of an unanswered call. She thought of a medical report with blanks that had looked like accusations, questions she had not been qualified to answer. Not yet. Outside, the windyard brightened, light catching on windshields and glass and a distant helmet dome. She traced the pale line at her wrist with her thumb. Not a story now, not decoration. A measure of cost, once paid in a bad minute and then recovered. Interest paid down by better minutes since she turned her steps toward the diner, toward the place where she had learned that order is not a prize, but a habit you build until it can carry you. She took the longer way past the garage where her father kept cars talking in low voices of oil and dust. The bay door hung half open. He sat on a rolling stool with a carburetor in his hands, fingers moving with the economy of time well spent. He looked up. His mouth made the shape of her name and let the room finish it. He did not ask about money. He asked about time. You ready? He said. No weight added, no weight taken away. I am, she said, and gave him the folder. He read the first page and nodded once. A small stamp. His thumb ran the edge, as if square or not could be sensed by touch alone. He handed it back and did not say proud. Some men bless with the work they keep doing. On the bench lay a motorcycle part cleaned to a dull glow, its face worn almost smooth. A stamped date, softened by years but not erased. It reminded her of the coin now asleep behind plastic in the binder. Weight transferred without speech. He followed her look and smiled like a man who sees his own language written in a new alphabet. He set the carburetor aside and leaned until the stool creaked. "Coffee," he said. "I have time," she said. They drank from mismatched mugs that had survived more mornings than a matching set ever would. They spoke of bolts and budgets and dawn starts. They did not speak of angels or codes or owed roads. Some things belonged to other rooms. He reached, touched the scar at her wrist with one forefinger, the way a mechanic touches a gasket, gentle and exact, and then let his hand fall. He had seen it before. Today he treated it like a tool. Sarah left with the folder under her arm and the sun at her back. The money was gone, transformed into paper, into hours already promised. But the code had set an expectation on her competence. She was no longer only a waitress. She was an asset in training, and assets are audited by the way they carry weight. The diner bell gave its tired chime when she pushed through, the room turning its head toward her like a dog does when it hears the person who feeds it. Gary stood at the register with the binder open and a new habit of not touching it unless he had to. Gus had a pan hot and a clean towel over his shoulder, a flag of purpose that would not need salutes. "How did it go?" Gary asked, voice threaded with respect and the distance that comes with it. "It went," she said. "We are on. Mornings for study. Evenings here. Nights as the book allows." "Good," he said. He placed the binder back on its shelf with care, not putting it away but putting it at a distance. A tool he respected that now answered to a higher authority. He kept his hands visible, a courtesy to the new geometry. The room accepted the shape. Gus leaned into the pass. "Lunch in 10, he said. "You want to breathe now, or later?" "Now," she said. He did not look at her like a coworker. He looked at her like a component he trusted. He nodded once and let the silence stand. A man acknowledging a peer who spoke a different, sharper language. The bell tapped and he slid a plate under the lamp, as if the lamp had asked for evidence. Sarah set the folder under the counter with the care you give a small animal asleep. She checked the board, straightened a slip that was already true, and set her palm on the steel. The metal told the same truth. It always tells when it is ready, clean, level, ready. Through the window, a flicker of chrome wrote a bright line in the far lane and did not slow. She did not wave. She did not nod. She pressed her hand to the back booth laminate exactly where Red had left heat last night and let a counter-pledge live there. The thin white line at her wrist crossed the edge for one breath, then disappeared under her cuff. Two teenagers came in with elbows disciplined and laughter quiet. They took the door table and practiced adulthood without being scolded. Sarah set down water already sweating and said nothing. They learned something anyway. A regular counted out cash for pie and coffee and left a little more than he used to. Gary did not announce it. He faced the bills and let them belong. The phone chirped once. Local. Gary listened. Owner's cousin wanted a look at the system that kept a Tuesday from becoming an incident. Gary smoothed the binder's edge with one finger and did not open it. "Let him come," Sarah said. "Let him see coin and line and neat minutes. Let him read pattern. Words can follow." She took the deposit copy from her jacket once more, read the ink that did not gloat, and slid it into a clear sleeve, marked with her name and the words for school. She lined its edge with the pale round ghost of the coin until the two shapes nearly touched. You do not need to fuse things for them to belong together. You keep them on the same line for when the room shakes. Afternoon gathered and held. Orders pinned and vanished. Forks spoke in small clicks. The bell worked its one note, heart sure of itself. The board climbed. The binder watched. The room behaved because people made it behave. Sarah moved through the verbs she owned: white, pour, place, nod. The verbs added up to a person who could enter a different room and keep someone breathing when the world tried to take that away. She looked once at the nursing text, folded into the folder: stop the bleeding, maintain the airway, stay calm. She thought of her sister again, of the report with unanswered questions, of a night that had left a contour where an answer should have been. The question waited now in Act 2, no longer an accusation but an assignment. She would learn the language it required. She pressed her palm flat on the counter and felt the steel say what steel says when it is clean and level and ready. Keep the book neat. Keep breathing. Keep going. Outside, the hill did not move. She would. The bell sounded small and exact. The minutes climbed in order. The day bent toward evening in a way that felt like a promise being kept, just as signs in cold ink. At its heart, this story reminds us that strength isn't found in loud victories, but in quiet persistence. Sarah's journey through fear, silence, and fragile peace mirrors the roads we all walk when life tests our dignity. In a world that often rewards noise, she chooses order, respect, and inner steadiness, proving that calm is not weakness, but mastery. Her story teaches us that justice begins long before a verdict. It begins when a person decides to no longer be ruled by fear. Sometimes, life puts us in rooms that do not welcome our voices. Yet, as this story shows, silence can be reshaped into something powerful when it's chosen, not imposed. True gold fears no fire, and through every flame of doubt and prejudice, Sarah discovers that her worth isn't defined by others' judgment, but by her own integrity. The diner, the ledger, the road, all become mirrors of life's code. You keep things clean, you keep breathing, and you keep going. In the end, justice isn't only about the law. It's about balance between pride and compassion, between the self we hide and the self we dare to become. And sometimes, the most radical act is to stay kind in a world that tempts us to harden. If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've lived through your own quiet reckoning. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that mix grit, heart, and reflection. Wherever you are tonight, may you find peace in the small, steady things. A warm cup, an honest word, a road that still waits for you to take the next step.